Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, a big update to the parental leave policy for military families. Find out how much time you can take off. Plus, an interview with an influential congressman on life after the Republican takeover of the House and what it means for defense. And Bradley's headed to Ukraine? Find out what's in the latest $3.8 billion aid package. Also, where will Ukrainians train on American Patriot batteries? We've got those details. Also, an interview with a former Green Beret now starring in a new movie. Hear about the film MVP. Finally, the Army takes another step forward with its upcoming mixed reality goggle system. Find out what's coming up. It's all those stories and a lot more in our episode this week, with the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon. This is Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Colin Demarest. First up this week, Congress recently approved a new parental leave policy for members of the military. In recent years, birthing parents have received 6 weeks of leave with 0 approved for their spouses or partners. But the new allowances are a lot more generous. Military Times Bureau Chief Megan Myers has more.
The new year brought a long-awaited new parental leave policy to members of the military, and it's a big one for families and parents-to-be. Starting in late December, all members of all services, whether they are a birthing parent or adoptive parent or a spouse, will get a significant increase in the time they can take off following the birth of a child. Everyone is now eligible to take up to 12 weeks of parental leave within the first year, and it can be spread out in multiple chunks. That's a big bump from the current policy, which across the services generally allowed for 6 weeks of convalescent leave, followed by 6 weeks of bonding leave for birthing parents, with variations of up to 3 weeks for non-birthing parents. Congress mandated the change as part of the 2022 National Defense Authorization Act, normalizing parental leave policies across the services and, for the first time, giving equal bonding time to both partners. Now, both partners can essentially double their allowable leave or more, and spread it out how they see fit. The policy applies to any babies welcomed after December 27th. For any non-birthing spouses who took less than their prior leave allotment for children welcomed in 2022, they have until their child's first birthday to take any remaining leave, up to the 12 weeks. What the latest policy doesn't include is clear guidance for convalescent leave. Previously, military maternity leave has consisted of 6 weeks to recover from delivery and another 6 weeks for bonding. The new policy covers only the bonding portion of that leave, with the provision to take convalescent leave if a doctor recommends it for a, quote, diagnosed medical condition. Also of note, not all of the services have implemented their own individual parental leave policies yet. For instance, the Army is still waiting on putting out its guidance. For more details, check out our coverage on militarytimes.com. For Military Times, I'm Megan Myers.
In other personnel news, interstate moves for working military spouses should get a little easier following a bill signed into law by President Biden recently. The new measure requires states to accept the transfer of professional licenses from spouses after they make a required move, a bill aimed at easing the process for military families. For everyone from realtors to nurses, getting sent across state lines can create real-world problems, as different locations don't always accept out-of-state licenses. The provision, dubbed the Military Spouse Licensing Relief Act, has one exception. Law licenses are not included. The new law is set to be rolled out in the near future. Next up, the U.S. approved its latest round of military aid to Ukraine. The headline, 50 Bradley fighting vehicles armed with anti-tank missiles headed to the battlefield as soon as possible. A Pentagon spokesperson said the new aid would help bolster an already highly successful Ukrainian defense.
We will ensure Ukraine has both the equipment and the skilled forces necessary to sustain its efforts to push back on Russian aggression. We are also committing 4,000 Zuni aircraft rockets, which can be mounted on Ukraine's existing aircraft to engage air or ground targets. In the category of air defense, which is still a top priority for Ukraine, given Russia's ongoing missile attacks, we are committing RIM-7 missiles. These can be integrated into Ukraine's Soviet-era tactical surface-to-air missile systems. On the ground in Ukraine, we continue to see intense fighting during this winter, especially in the east around Crimea and Bakhmut. Ukrainian forces are showing an undiminished will to fight to defend their country. Ukraine will continue fighting through the winter with the backing of a large coalition of nations, and we continue to encourage allies and partners to make additional donations to bolster Ukraine's combat and air defense capabilities. The United States has now committed more than $24.2 billion in security assistance since Russia's full-scale invasion last February, and we will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes.
As you look at the U.S. and the international response by providing the equipment and, importantly now, the training that we're providing, it does afford Ukraine an opportunity to change the equation on the battlefield and gain momentum and not only defend their territory, but hopefully take back territory. And so this is part of that ongoing effort to support them in that larger campaign.
The latest tranche totaled $3.75 billion in support, including a range of weaponry and armored vehicles, along with nearly $1 billion in cash for Ukraine and European nations to buy U.S.-made weapons. The U.S. is also sending 155mm Paladin self-propelled howitzers for the first time, along with dozens of 105mm howitzers and nearly 100,000 rounds. The latest aid was welcomed by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and came within days of a visit by high-ranking senators and members of the Armed Services Committee, Jack Reed and Angus King. And in related news, Ukrainian soldiers may travel to Fort Sill, Oklahoma to receive Patriot missile system training. That's according to a recent CNN report that says the training could start within days and last several months. Defense News reported last month that the U.S. would provide Ukraine a Patriot missile defense system as part of a package of military aid bound for Kyiv to defend against Russia's invasion. That announcement came as President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Washington, D.C. He had sought the Patriot system for months before his December trip. Finally, the Air Force released footage recently of a daring rescue from early 2022. In February of last year, a cruise ship hailed the 301st Rescue Squadron to help evacuate a patient. But with the ship some 600 nautical miles offshore, the mission was a difficult operation for the helicopter and air crews slated to carry it out. Requiring 2 refuels each just to get to the ship, the 2 HH-60G Pavehawk helicopters were able to make it to the scene, supported by a pair of HC-130J Combat King aircraft. When we come back, the Army walks forward its augmented reality goggle system, and a Democratic congressman talks about working on military issues in a Republican-controlled House. Welcome back. There's been a lot happening in the world of defense contracting, so let's kick it off with this week's edition of Defense Dollars. Canada announced plans recently to buy 88 F-35A Joint Strike Fighters for $14 billion. Defense Minister Anita Anand said in an online briefing the Royal Canadian Air Force would receive its first 4 Lockheed Martin-made F-35s in 2026, with the next 6 in 2027 and another 6 in 2028. The remainder would come in the subsequent years. The 5th-generation fighters will replace Canada's current fleet of CF-18 Hornets, the Royal Canadian Air Force's version of the FA-18. Canada expects the full F-35 fleet to be delivered in time for the service to phase out the older fighters by the end of 2032. Anand said Canada has procured Australian FA-18 fighters to supplement its CF-18s in the meantime. Canada plans to upgrade its CF-18s as a part of the Hornet extension project to enable them to last until 2032. Australia announced recently it will boost its defense capabilities by spending more than $700 million on new advanced missile and rocket systems, including US-made HIMARS, which have been successfully used by Ukraine's military. In Ukraine, the mobile, truck-mounted HIMARS have proved crucial in enabling Ukrainian forces to hit key targets, including a recent strike on a single building that had killed at least 89 Russian soldiers. Talking to the AUBC in late December, Australian Defence Industries Minister Pat Conroy spoke to how the success in the current war in Eastern Europe influenced his country's decision.
The effectiveness of the HIMARS system in the Ukrainian conflict has certainly influenced the government's decision here. Firstly, we've seen it being used very effectively by the Ukrainian military in response to Vladimir Putin's illegal and unprincipled and unprovoked attack on the people and land of Ukraine. We've seen mobile rocket systems being very effective in defending Ukraine. And secondly, that effectiveness has led to a massive increase in global demand for the HIMARS system, and that's why the Australian government increased the speed of the acquisition. We moved from making a decision sometime in 2023 to making a decision in 2022 because it was so important to retain our position in the production line for the HIMARS system. And just to give you an idea of how big a step up this system is, the Australian Army will be going from having an ability to strike targets 30 kilometres away to eventually being able to strike targets at ranges greater than 499 kilometres. So this is a massive increase in land strike capability.
The Australian government said it had also signed a contract with Norway-based Kongsberg to buy naval strike missiles for destroyers and frigates, which would replace aging Harpoon anti-ship missiles starting next year. Citing confidentiality for security and operational reasons, the Australian government did not give a cost breakdown of the two systems, or say how many of each it was buying. But last year, the US State Department approved a potential foreign military sale, saying Australia had requested to buy 20 Lockheed Martin-made HIMARS and related equipment at an estimated cost of $385 million. As for Australia, Conroy feels the island nation should keep some of its manufacturing in-house.
For our sovereign independence, we need to explore seriously, can we manufacture parts or all of the ordnance in Australia? I was recently in Washington in October and I had some very productive meetings with the Secretary of the US Army, with Lockheed Martin and congressional leaders about the opportunities to manufacture missiles and other explosive ordnance in Australia. This is something that is critical after the Ukraine conflict, demonstrating global supply chains are under pressure. It's also something where we, as an ally of the United States, can support their efforts and Air Force posture in the Pacific region as well.
The US Army is moving ahead with an advanced variant of its mixed reality goggle aimed at transforming situational awareness and more for the dismounted soldier. The service announced it awarded a task order to Microsoft to develop the 1.2 variant of the Integrated Visual Augmentation System. The goggle is based on Microsoft's HoloLens. The do-it-all goggle brings the situational awareness and systems approach more traditionally available only to platforms such as fighter pilots or tank crew commanders, but for the individual dismounted soldier networked with a squad and larger units. And the device has been tested in combination with existing platforms such as Army helicopters and ground vehicles, allowing soldiers to communicate with the crews and virtually see outside the platform and pass data among their unit and the vehicle's crew. Soldiers will receive 10,000 units total. That incremental fielding will begin in September, according to the Army's Program Executive Office Soldier. Previous budget details covered an initial purchase of a total of 40,000 units. Up next, Representative Ruben Gallego is a Marine Corps veteran who has served Arizona since 2014. In the wake of the recent turnover of the House to Republican control, he sat down with Military Times podcast team to talk about recent events and the future of defense bills in Congress. Here's part of that conversation.
Well, on the defense side, I'm going to stay on as ranking member of the Intel Special Operations Committee. I want to continue to do the evolution of really moving special forces away from CT missions to great power competition, to prepare for great power competition, make sure that we're effectively fighting China and Russia in the gray zone, and preparing our allies for future conflict. With that in mind, continue doing a lot of the leadership I've had with the Baltic Security Initiative, an initiative that I created and got funded for the last 3 years and has been extremely important, I think, both to our Baltic countries, but also in terms of messaging to them that we are with them. And then lastly, still working on kind of the greater kind of China competition conversation, whether it comes to making sure that we're degrading China's ability to conquer the future communications world with their ability to penetrate our information markets. And then I think on the defensive side, I think there's going to be this effort by a minority of the Armed Services Committee to try to fight their cultural battles on the Armed Services Committee. And I think it'll be our goal to basically try to not just stop them, but refocus the committee to make sure that we're, paying the right attention to the right issues and funding the right programs versus, these types of, quote unquote woke battles.
The GOP has made clear that they want to investigate the Biden administration's withdrawal out of Afghanistan in 2021. How do you plan to approach or possibly counter the narratives coming out of these investigations by Republicans, especially as they are seeking, to score some political points going into the 2024 re-election campaign, in theory, if Biden decides to run again?
Look, I think legitimate oversight is important, and even legitimate oversight about what happened in Afghanistan is important. But if you're not going to look at this holistically about the decisions that were made prior to us pulling out, like the decisions that were made and the things that were negotiated under Trump, then this is not a real investigation. This is just an investigation to score points. And then I will not be participating in that. I'll try to actually make sure that we are expanding this to make sure that there's true oversight. So I think there should be something we should be looking into what happened, how the decision-making process was made. It's important that we do that. We have after-action reports in the military. We should have after-action reports what happens with our military decisions. But you cannot get a full scope of what happened unless we see everything that went into that.
Speaker McCarthy also reportedly made a handshake agreement with the 20-plus holdouts revolving around sticking to 2022 funding levels, which includes the defense budget for the next appropriations bill. And this idea has gained some traction in traditionally hawkish Republican circles. If this gains traction, do you see a large decrease in defense spending in 2024? Is there a big enough will among the Republicans in the conference?
I don't think there's a big enough will within the Republicans on the Armed Services Committee where we're going to craft this. So the question is, how do you get this out of the floor? And I think, depending how this looks, there could be a possibility for it to go down. Do I think that there's legitimate ways for us to reduce the defense budget? I think there is. I think a arbitrary number is not the way to do it, though. You don't need to take a meat cleaver to defense budget. You should take a scalpel to it. And if somehow these Republicans think that there's $75 billion worth of woke projects in the defense budget, they're definitely not paying attention to the defense budget.
Definitely. And you mentioned that there's some stuff that you could take a scalpel to, not a meat cleaver. Are there certain things you're looking at in the next round of defense appropriations? I'm
going to wait for the budget to really come out and so I could actually take a look at it, what the recommended budgets are, so I could actually take a better look at it. But there's always, I think, some legacy platforms that could be retired. I think there's always different types of efficiencies we could find with between reservists and active duty. Also seeing if we can work with our allied partners for them to pick up certain roles and responsibilities in other areas, so that way we could shift our focus to Indo-PACOM or to EUCOM instead of being all over the world with the expenses and logistics that goes with it too.
For more from that podcast, head to defensenews.com/EBB. When we come back, our personal finance expert is back with her latest tips. This week, steps to take before heading on deployment. Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack breaks down the important financial moves to consider before going on deployment. Take it away, Jeanette.
Deployments can be tough on the service member and on families too. Being prepared financially gives you one less thing to worry about and a lot more peace of mind for everyone else. So get your plan together. Make sure you've written down your monthly spending plan and account for anything that could affect your regular monthly income. Savings should be easier while you're deployed, so make it work in your favor. Set up automatic deposits to a savings account while you're gone. Also, protect your credit. Set up autopay for bills like the mortgage, car, or utilities. And protect yourself from fraud by putting an active duty alert on your credit reports. Update and prepare legal documents and make sure someone you trust knows where they are and any important passwords. Take advantage of financial protections like the Service Member Civil Relief Act that offers legal and financial protection to active duty service members. Check if you qualify for any special federal tax treatment and make sure your credit card company knows you're being deployed and the dates. These are just some of the financial steps you can take before your next deployment. Talk to your bank or credit union for more guidance and resources.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next time. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, navigate over to Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps Times.com, DefenseNews.com, and my home on the internet, C4ISRnet.com. And to be the smartest Marine in the squad when it comes to news, sign up for our early bird brief for stories delivered to your inbox each weekday. It's also in audio. Check out the podcast version, out now. And if social media is where you get your headlines, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. When we come back, a former Green Beret and NFL player talks about his new movie, MVP. Welcome back. 42-year-old Nate Boyer has quite a story. A former Green Beret from California, he later walked onto the University of Texas football team despite never having played the sport, and eventually became a long snapper for the Seattle Seahawks. Also an actor, Boyer stars in a new film about the bond between troops and athletes after they take off their uniforms. Military Times' Jonathan Lehrfeld talked to Boyer about the film.
The premise of the movie MVP, it's sort of based on the genesis of a veteran service organization that I co-founded with Jay Glazer called Merging Vets and Players. So we bring together combat vets and former professional athletes, and we help them find purpose and identity when they lose a uniform. MVP is what we call Merging Vets and Players for short, and that's what we called the movie. It's based on a true story. It's about a Marine who was living in a homeless shelter on Sunset Boulevard, and he meets a former NFL player, first year out of the league, who is struggling with that transition, losing the uniform, losing the team, the locker room, that camaraderie, that purpose, that mission, all those things we feel like we lose when we leave the military, this athlete's feeling. But he's got a wife, a kid, a cool car, a nice house, all these things. So on paper, you know, these guys have nothing in common. It's a black dude, it's a white dude from different backgrounds and everything, you know, and obviously the military and sports, like those aren't the same. But they're going through the exact same thing. They're going through that same issue of feeling like I could have done more. When I lost the locker rooms, it was in the same year. I left the military in February 2015. I got cut from the Seahawks September 2015. I went from having, you know, these two uniforms, camouflage and a jersey that I identified with, and a reason to be somewhere at some time every day, you know, and show up and stay in shape and eat right, and, you know, have that locker room, that team, those people that depended on me, and those people that become very close to us, brothers in different ways. And then I lost it, you know, and MVP, the organization, even though I was a co-founder of it, I was a member first, you know. I mean, it helped save me, and it helps me realize what I'm capable of. I've got those people in there every week building me up, building each other up, reminding one another of like our worth and who we are. We talk about survivor's guilt a lot in the military, but something we always like to touch on in MVP is survivor's responsibility. Like, you made it back, you're here. Now, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to honor those that didn't? You know, what are you going to do with your life?
Just want to thank you for what you did the other night. Yeah, you looked out for me.
Most of my post-traumatic stress is from lack of traumatic stress.
Man, I missed the locker room!
You own a gym. Why not make it a locker room? That's all you got?
What if we had some of your dudes come down, get in there with some of my dudes?
Pay your asses. Help, get up. I got you.
I would never compare battlefields to ball fields, but the camaraderie, the pride, it's crazy how all that stuff matches up.
You're not at war anymore. You gotta move forward.
You're poking the bear, you're gonna get hurt. Come on, hit me.
You didn't die, so when are you gonna start living? I don't give anything, just run out on that field one more time.
We can't lose. We're your team now.
That's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com, defensenews.com, and c4isrnet.com for more coverage. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.